Alright, so this is part 2 of our TOK presentation on beauty. Again, I'm going to repeat the disclaimer in part 1. None of the pictures here are our own. We do not take credit for them. We were not paid to say anything in this presentation. And for those of you tuning in to just this presentation, we are discussing the knowledge question of to what extent does culture influence our perception of beauty? So we've already talked about how science influences. Now let's talk about another area of knowledge, math. Math is supposed to be a universal language of some sorts that applies to everything and everyone. It's supposed to be extremely objective and supposed to be rather perfect in many senses. So it goes to show that there is a perfect ratio that exists. The golden ratio, the divine ratio, whatever you wish to call it, is defined as the Greek letter phi is equal to 1.618. This divine ratio is found all throughout the world in many different things, including rock formations, how flowers flower and petal in their petals formation, and even down to the human face. So with this perfect ratio, it goes to show that someone would take it and create the perfect human face. So there was a plastic surgeon who used this perfect ratio to create what he called the golden mask. So here's a short clip that's going to explain what that is. So this is by Marquette. So he made a decagon using the golden ratio. Then he placed smaller decagons like the one seen here in green and all the other ones that are now appearing on the screen to create a mask of a human face. When you remove all the pieces that don't intersect with the decagon, you actually create a mask, as seen here. And this would be what the final product would be. As you can see, the mask follows all different symmetry lines and harmonious patterns, following the perfect ratio and other things. So this is the mask that you would then take and apply it to a human's face. And the plastic surgeon would go in and have the face create the same planes as seen here. And so it has been called the golden facial mask because of it. So he took the perfect mathematical number and created a mask that he then applies to different people. So here's an example. Automatically, we know that the woman on the right is more beautiful than the woman on the left, yet they are the same person. She has just undergone the mask treatment and surgery. So the woman on the right has better facial features in the sense that they are more symmetrical, they are more harmonious, and therefore they're more pleasing to the eye. Psychology says that the human brain likes harmony, doesn't like anything to be out of place and chaotic. And so even though a face can't really be chaotic, your brain still recognizes high levels of structure. And that's what you consider beautiful right off the bat. So when we're talking about math, we have to bring up the ways of knowing. And the main one is reason. Math is highly logical and uses reason very heavily. And the way that reason specifically applies to the perfect ratio is that we have seen this divine ratio through many different things, and so we have reasoned that it is then very important to have and is therefore beautiful. And so if it's beautiful in nature, such as a flower petaling, or the petals on a flower, or a great rock formation, then we can reason that we can apply that same mathematical formula to the human face. And that's what they did to create the golden mask, is they reasoned that they could take something beautiful in nature and apply it to humans. And also we used perception. As we mentioned in the picture before, we perceived the woman on the right to be more beautiful because our brains naturally see the difference in color and difference in structure and difference in symmetry. So we are drawn to the more perfect, quote-unquote, idea, an ideal face. And so we can see it just like we saw in science, where we perceive the strong man or the better childbearing woman. We can perceive the symmetry of the face. But even math varies. So although math this formula transcends cultures, it doesn't actually apply to every single culture in the same way. Meaning that the bone structure of a human skull is different depending on where a person comes from, their ethnicity. So a Caucasian, an African, and an Asian woman all have different skull structures. And this is how anthropologists are able to decide where a set of remains or a person is from based on their skull structure. So even if we apply the mask to different skull structures, it creates a different face. Although all of them are still beautiful, it is different. And so again, this is now showing that culture is again above math. Because although math is throughout all the different cultures in that sense, each one of them takes that baseline and adds to it, makes it slightly different. The contours and the placement of the decagon is slightly different for each face. And so that's what creates the difference between them. So why is this important at all? Well, math is supposedly super logical and super rational and super objective. And so it's hard to place such objective ideas on something as subjective as beauty. Beauty is what is in the eye of the beholder is the most common phrase. And because of that, it's hard to apply the objectiveness that is in the perfect ratio. Although most people would agree that the perfect ratio made the woman more beautiful, it also doesn't apply to everything and doesn't work in every situation. And because of that, we cannot say that it's math that makes a person beautiful or that perfect ratio is what beauty is. And so with that, as we mentioned, culture is above math because it is each individual person and their background and their culture that creates the different faces that are known for the beautiful mask to be put on them. And so,
in conclusion, we have decided that culture influences our perception of beauty to a great extent. Even though we have ideas in science like natural selection and in math like the perfect ratio that are prevalent worldwide, it's the culture's perception of these ideas that influences what we think is beautiful. So in natural selection and evolution, what makes you better fit for the environment depends on where you live. It depends on the culture. And even in math, the ratios are interpreted differently and applied to different cultures, and the bone structures are different depending on where you live. And the one exception to the idea of beauty and the human Barbie is that the Barbie is an American phenomenon, but we as Americans still don't think it's beautiful, so that's kind of a limitation.
and although we can admire the beauty in different cultures, we always put ours slightly above. Our ideal beautiful is always slightly higher than everyone else's. So the women in the BuzzFeed are beautiful, even though they represent ideals of other cultures, but it isn't just the American ideal that I'm used to. And again, we still put the American ideal picture slightly above those of the other cultures. And as mentioned before, even though Barbie is prevalent in our culture, we still do not think that Valeria is beautiful because she violates other factors, such as the math ratio of her face and the science that she can no longer bear children. Yet there is also a baseline of certain aspects of beauty, such as phi and natural selection. Each culture then takes it and interprets it differently, and that's how we got all the different beauties. And also, our culture is what defines the change in beauty. No longer is it as important to have a strong man that can fight off a lion for you as it is to have a successful man who can pay for you and provide for your kids and such. And so, you see this in slightly less developed cultures. They still look for the person who is strong, who is going to take care of them, who can hunt and fish and bring back food, as it is important for survival. But in cultures that are more developed, more industrial, like American culture and Western culture, there is more of an emphasis on being successful. So some say it's taller people are now more successful. It changes depending on the time. So our culture is the leading influence in beauty. It changes what we perceive as beautiful, and it also changes each individual type of beauty. So although natural selection and math act on all beauty, it is each individual culture that acts. So this, again, although cliche, does help add validity to the idea that beauty truly is in the eye of the beholder. Thank you for listening to our presentation. And here is our Works Cited if you wish to see any of our videos.
And so this is our Works Cited. This is page 1, and this is page 2 if you want to do more research on